welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have as our special guest Brian Gower. And Brian, you've been on the show before. I can't remember. It was a little over a year ago.
I want to say, yeah, just about a year since I've been on. I think last was on with Josh, so it was a Whirly Birds episode.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And
Now it's just a twofer, it's a duet.
I know. I can't remember when we exactly did that episode, but I think it was right after we went and did the one day with Coach Schneider up in Tracy.
Yes,
California.
yes.
And I was just thinking about that the other day, that it was right exactly about a year ago that went down. And I was kind of jealous because they were doing that. Co wasn't up there, but they were doing that thing at Tracy, whatever they were doing, and they had
the guitar show.
Robin Ford was playing, and they were doing something. I know Jonathan Fellows had some kind of workshops and stuff, so that was kind of that's kind of cool to say that they're still doing that, because I think that was like a first year thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I did, see, Jonathan Fellows on Instagram, or was it Facebook or something, that he was doing something again. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They're still doing it, and still getting music out, and playing music and guitars and stuff like that. That's what I think is a really cool thing. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. The one thing I was most jealous about, he has this friend named Rolf, I think, that he was the guy that came to his workshop the day after and had like all those really like old 50s Fender amps.
Oh yeah, those ones.
Yeah, and he did like some kind of like vintage amp petting zoo thing, and I saw some picture he posted like on Instagram or something, and it was like a whole entire van load of old vintage amps. I was just like, oh.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. Those are cool, but I'm like, it's such a world that I'm not involved in with like vintage gear. I'm like,
Yeah.
I never get my hands on it, so I'm like, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know what I'm missing ever. Like, to me, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, like I see the idea of vintage gear, but then sometimes like if you get a vintage head, sometimes the ohms don't match up anymore because they're really like
Yeah.
2 or 4 ohms or whatever, and then I'm like, or they're not like grounded properly. Or like, you could possibly get shocked.
which did happen.
It did happen, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know, that kind of is scary to me, because I'm like, I wouldn't want to play with that. And it's something, I don't know, I'm kind of at the mindset right now with my gear. If I'm not using it, then, I couldn't see myself just having it to have it. But I don't know. I mean, then there's the people that have like, oh, I got my old school 60s Fender Strat or whatever, or like, 70s like Strat or Telly or something like that, and then I have my old brown face Fender. I'm like, dang, this is kind of cool. It's like that whole like, I'm like, I don't know what I'm missing, because I'm like, I guess that's cool, but I'm like, it still scares me. I'm like, these things aren't reliable as the ones are now.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm reading up. I would really, really, really like to be able to repair and do things on my own amp, and actually, like, if I need to, like, to me, I can change like preamp tubes. I can figure that out. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not a whole lot of biasing or anything to do with that. But when it comes to like, oh, power tubes and biasing those and make sure you don't shock yourself, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna pay somebody probably way more money than I should to go deal with it.
Yeah. I got into that world I guess several years back. It kind of by default, I had picked up like an old 60s Super Reverb.
Mm-hmm.
And it was having some issues, and I was asking around on some forums, and some people kind of walked me through, oh, do this, and before I knew it, I was like watching videos online and how to change the caps, and
yeah.
before I knew it, like I was doing little small things, and then I got somebody had like a twin reverb that they let me kind of do the same thing on. And anyways, I got shocked so bad one day.
Oh boy.
Because you get to working on those things, and you get to like trying to cross the finish line with them, and you forget that you're working on an amp that has like deadly voltage in those things.
Yeah.
And I just reached down inside that amp and boom, it's like I let out a scream.
Oh dang!
And
Woke up the whole house. You're like, oh boy.
yeah, after that, I was so terrified. I wouldn't I wouldn't put my hands inside a live amp anymore. Like even with like a voltmeter with the
Uh-huh.
probes, like I would literally take alligator clips
Mhm.
with it off, with it unplugged, and plug it where I needed to, then power everything up and read what I needed to read, because that's like how terrified I was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're smart. You learned.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if you got that and you're like, all right, well, diving back in.
Yeah.
It's a one thing. Sometimes it's you learn quickly that way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I learned that there was some tools that I did not have that I needed to do to properly bench test. And this is kind of why I stopped. I was like, if I don't have these tools, I'm not gonna do any more of this. And so I kind of dialed back.
Totally.
Yeah. And so anyways, I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but we were talking about the one day from last year, and so just kind of wanted to catch up on kind of where you're at in your journey, and kind of what's going on in your world.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great to talk to you. I don't think I've seen you since NAM. I mean,
Mhm.
well, obviously I'm in San Diego. You're, shoot, where are you again? I won't
In
want to say.
Mississippi.
God, okay, I was about to say Tennessee. I'm glad I asked before. I said I just assumed you're over there in Tennessee. So we're pretty far away. But I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like a lot of these, like with people in the guitar community, I'm like, oh, I know, I see them all the time. Wait, no, I haven't seen them. You just talk to each other online, and it's like kind of the fun thing about online and 2019, where we are with our smartphones and social media nowadays. You feel like you know somebody, and you're like, oh, I'm in their world. I'm listening to your podcast, and I'm like, I know Clifton. Yeah, we caught up. I'm like, I haven't seen him since January.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's things are going well. Yeah, the podcast is going well. It's a lot of fun still, and I think that's one of the biggest things. When it becomes not fun, that's when it's gonna be like, hey,
Yeah.
take a look at this. But yeah, no, it's still fun. We're playing in so maybe I'll give a little bit of a backstory. Maybe your listeners don't know. So I have a podcast called the Tone Jerks Podcast. It's kind of a guitar podcast. It's and I like it, and I'm gonna steal it from him. RJ from Teletalks. He said it's not really a guitar podcast as much as it is a musician's lifestyle podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We're in bands. We obviously have equipment and guitars and stuff like that. So sometimes we talk about that. Sometimes we talk about gigs. Sometimes we talk about our inspirations and what music we're writing and songwriting and studio production and stuff like that. So that's the podcast. And my co-host is Kyle, who is actually my bass player and singer for the band I'm in. So him and I, we've been friends forever. And so when I say, oh, our band and our podcast, we are the same people. We've been doing it forever. We, have been friends forever, and it's a lot of fun. So we're two creative sides of ourselves, and like maybe like the podcast might not be as creative as a band would be, but it's still like you have to like record it and do it, and make sure it's a good conversation at least once a week. And yeah, both of those are growing really, really well. The band this year, I want to say we started picking up and playing shows again after like several month hiatus. Our drummer had his first baby, and so we were like, oh, totally respecting his space. I'm like, he's got to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Him and his wife. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what that entails. I'm like, give it your time. He's like, oh, give me a few months, give me some time to actually like be a dad and be there and stuff like that, and actually then I can swing it back into work and playing shows. And that was totally great for us because it gave us time to like, I don't know, like go to NAM and do stuff like that and like whatever, and not have to worry about like make sure we're booking shows and promoting the shows. But yeah, we're, I don't know, kind of in the swing of things with both. And the band is growing well. We've been playing shows at least consistently, maybe once or twice a month, and some good ones, some not so good ones, but it's been fun. And like with the podcast, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing,
Yeah, totally. And I found like if it stops being fun, you just take a little break, and get inspiration again, and you're ready to go at it. So I imagine that kind of would work with a band too.
Yeah, totally, totally. But yeah, no, we're getting that going, and we're in the middle of recording an EP, and I've talked about it several times on my show. I'm just getting the motivation into actually finishing it. It's like terrible, but we don't need to finish it. Which is like, well, don't you want to get your music out to promote it? I'm like, well, we have really good albums to promote our band. We don't need to do this. It's just kind of a thing for us. I'm like, oh, we're creative people. My bass player and I, we both write our songs. And even the drummer helps us write. And he's a big songwriter in the band as well, which you wouldn't, I know it sounds like, are you just making that up? Our drummer is like a songwriter, like legit. He sings and stuff like that. And so it's like he has, and music, background. He writes his own songs for other projects, yada, yada. So we were like very collaborative record that we're like, oh yeah, cool. We kind of just wrote it and be like, we need to get this EP out. It's not record, it's an EP. And we're like, cool, cool, cool. And now it's like, okay. So I'm now figuring out how to juggle the whole like, oh, podcast and cool. And like, I am trying to put time into promoting that and making sure we are giving a good product, I guess, to say, even though it's free, trying to do that, and then realizing like, oh, I need to shift gears. And like the whole reason I have recording equipment and software that I'm, using Pro Tools and trying to, get better at it and be a good engineer. I'm like, oh, it's for my band and it's for music as well. Cause like, you can record 2 vocals. I'm like, how's the mixing on that? Well, make sure they're both kind of level. Okay, cool. And but with the band, I'm like, okay, that's the one thing I'm like, you know what? I need to get on top of that and just kind of push myself to do it. So that's for me in my own head. I'm in the middle of like balancing. You got your work, you got your play. I have the podcast, I have the band, and I'm like, you know what? I need to spin all the plates and not like let any of them, fall and wobble. So that's where I'm at. I guess that was a long. I'm gonna do this a lot, Clifton. I'm just like talking. You're gonna have to reel me in.
I wanted to kind of dig back because I don't think that we've talked about this at length any, but how you got into playing music, and obviously Kyle, you've been playing music with him for a very long while, and kind of where did all that begin, and kind of give us an update there, a backstory on that.
Oh no, that's yeah, dang, I've been on a couple podcasts and I don't think I've ever gone that far. Yeah, dang. Okay, let me scale it back here. I think I knew I wanted to be in a band or start a band at a pretty young age. I think when I was like definitely like 13, 12, that area, that age, to me, that was, young. And it was like a huge jump because the whole time before then, I never listened to music. I'd never cared. It was just like, kind of just like a frumpy little fat kid who just played, ate junk food and like played video games. And I drew. I was really into drawing. I was like art, and I was like cartoons. I made my own comic strips and like gave them out to all my friends at school and stuff like that. Wrote my own stories and characters and whatever. And like friends were like, "Oh, this is funny," and then like you'd get confiscated sometimes and be like, "What the heck?" Teachers would be like, "Okay, this is distracting for the class," and they read it. I'm like, "It's good, but it's distracting. Stop it." And so I was creative in one sense. And then it really was a whole flip of a switch. And a friend made a joke. He's like, it's almost like once he heard a Blink-182 Green Day record, he wanted to be in a band. Mm-hmm. That was it. And I'm like, that is true. I heard, those 2 bands kind of at the same time. I'm in San Diego. So let me just say like pop punk was a huge thing. And it still kind of is here in San Diego. It's like everybody loves Blink. It's like the, skate shoes with the dicky shorts that are down to your, ankles practically, and then like the sideways hat, and it's like everybody's playing strats that are down to their knees, and that was it. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that. And so like I kind of almost put away my video games, put away my art books and stuff like that, which I kind of wish I could have balanced that. But when you're 12, you're like, it's one thing or the other. I can't do both. So anyway, that took a back seat. And then so I was like, okay, I need to get an instrument and stuff like that. My parents have always, it's like when you're growing up, they're not going to be like, yeah, anything you want, I'm just going to buy it for you. It's like, okay, they're like, also, let's see if he really wants to do this kind of thing. We're not going to buy you an instrument. Work for it, and you do it. And when you're 12, like you can't really like, oh, I'm going to go pound the pavement and go get a job, and like, oh, I'm going to go whatever it is. At least in San Diego, I think you had to be at least 15 to 16 to get a work permit from school, signed off by yada yada. There's a lot of stuff to do to get a job here in San Diego as a kid. Anyway, so like when I was 12, I'm like, okay, I did everything I could. I think I sold video games. I sold things to my friends that I'm like, okay, like a bike. You want this? Which I'm like, I was a fat kid. I should have probably rode that bike more. But I gave it to him. I got money. I'm like, okay, I'm pooling money. He's doing this. I'm doing more chores. I'm like, cutting grass. I'm doing like whatever chores I could do for, like family and friends and stuff like that. I did it. I sold everything I could to get money. And then it got to, I got a bass because I was kind of like drums, guitar, bass. I didn't care. And so the first thing that came up to me was a bass that my aunt actually had sold me she practically gave it to me. She's like kind of said like, okay, was like my parents, let's see how hard he works. Oh, he did save up the money for it. And then she kind of pretty much gave it to me. And then it was like, okay, here's just this. And then pretty much like gave it back to me and buying me an amp, So I'm like, electric bass and an amp. And I'm like, cool, I'm off to the races. I played it until like, it was a poorly set up bass because it was like, she kind of didn't really do anything with it. And like, cause she played when she was in high school, yada, yada. She didn't anymore. It was kind of just hanging out. And then I loved that thing. I played all the time and I didn't even really know what I was doing until like, my older sister, her boyfriend at the time was like, oh, I kind of know a thing or two on bass. And so he taught me, oh, here's a bass line to, My Girl. And I was like, boom, boom, boom. And I was like, I played that all day. Because when I first learned my first bass line, I was like, cool, I just did that over and over. And I didn't know the rest of the song. I just knew that first like main bass line. And then he's like, okay, well, let me show you tabs. Because I'm like, when you're a kid, like tabs, okay, that's easy to get. And he's like, okay, and then you can go to this website here, and you can learn songs that you like, because you already know how to do tabs. And I'm like, that was the thing for me. I'm like, I was done. I was like doing, and I was like, because like he only knew that, and I didn't even know there was picks. So I played finger bass, like that the way I guess, quote unquote, that's the way you should play bass. And that's how I learned. And I'm like, okay, he taught me how to do that. And it's like, okay, do the 1, 2, or those are your 2 fingers. And so that's how I learned how to play. And I like kept doing that. And then I stuck with it for a while. And then my parents were like, okay, he actually wants to do this. So they invested in some lessons. And it was really great because I learned probably from a pretty early age. And I think it's great. I learned actual music theory. And my bass player, or my bass, teacher or whatever, that, it's like a local guitar shop or whatever. He was great. He taught me, because he was like an older guy who was like into like, rock and roll and stuff like that, and blues and stuff like that. He's like, oh, I know you like punk, but I'm not going to, he's like, look, I'm not going to teach you Blink-182 songs. And I'm like, oh, he's like, you can learn that on your own. Don't do that here. I'm going to show you the quote unquote proper way to play bass. So it was good. I felt like I really learned a lot. And he's like, okay. And he was a guitar player. And he's like, let me show you how you complement guitar parts. And he's like, okay, if I'm playing this, you're going to be doing this. And theory and, I learned a little bit of it. And then I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm practicing a lot. And I'm getting to a point where I want to play in a band. And he was like, was just getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm doing the same thing every week. I don't want to. I could tell, like, when you're like even 14, you're like, I'm wasting my parents' money. Or 13, 14, I'm like, I'm wasting my parents' money. I'm not getting anything out of this anymore. And the guy didn't want to show me the things I really wanted to learn. So I'm like, okay, we stopped. But I had learned enough of music theory, I would say, to do some damage. So even from like that point, I was like, okay, I want to start writing songs. So I started, writing songs. And at this point, I had gotten like a cheap Squier acoustic guitar, which I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I can kind of figure out chords. And so I had like some like tape memo recorder thing I don't one of those like mini little tapes that you like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna record a voice memo or whatever. Back in the day before cell phones had that, I would record a guitar part, like just chords, and I was like, oh, and I was like, doing exactly what the teacher would do. I'm like, okay, figure out bass lines to go with this. And so I was just figuring it out. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I kind of went to high school at that point, and all the friends I had, none of them prior to high school, none of them really ever got into music like I did. That was the goal. Everybody was like, we had like a group of 3 or 4 friends. We're like, we're all gonna be a band when we're like 8th grade or whatever. Never happened. We moved to high school. I'm like, okay, cool. There's tons more people, and I was like, I'm gonna start a band. So I started going up to people who I knew were musicians, and they were into punk rock and stuff like that I was. But you learn quickly. I went to a new school, so I didn't really know anybody at this point. Let me just bring that back. I thought, hey, you can talk to musicians, right? Because you both like music, you both play instruments, and then you both like the same music that as the other one does. Should be friends, right? Wrong. No, it's high school. They don't want to talk to you. They're mean. They're band. They're a better player than you are. I'm like, man, this is going to be hard to start a band. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not going to form a band with these kids. I'm like, I kept on doing that a couple times. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to keep playing. And then until I met Kyle, so my bass player. And the thing is, I had met him when I was younger through a friend. So we kind of just like, had met when we were like 8 years old, and we were kind of friends, hung out for a little bit. But when you're like 8 years old, you can't always just be like, I'm going to hang out with my friend. You're kind of like separated or whatever. Your parents not gonna be like, oh yeah, go ahead, take the trolley. At least in San Diego, you're not going to do that. Anyway, so we had kind of like known each other for a little while, and we came back and crossed paths again in high school. I'm like, oh, cool, we're in the same classes, We became friends, like clicked instantly. Okay, cool. But the problem was we were both bass players. We both had basses. What are you going to do? So we just decided like, hey, well, we can't be in a band. All right, let's go find other people and start our own bands. So and then we he found a drummer and he was jamming with him, and then I ended up like, okay, same deal. I'm like, I'll get an electric guitar. I worked really hard for it. I think I'd sold other things that I'd bought at the time to get a guitar, and I'd like worked chores and stuff like that. And I finally got an electric guitar and 25-watt practice amp, and I'm like, whatever, it should be fine, because you're a kid. You're like, that's gonna be fine for practice, right? And so we started jamming with this drummer, and I just wasn't really good at timing. Like, I just never practiced to a metronome, which I'm like, I had played for like 2 years at that point, never to a metronome. I could not get it. So anyways, I jammed with Kyle and this drummer, and the drummer's like, no, I don't want to work with this guy. And at that point, when you're like, still early high school, like 14 and whatever, freshman year. And so anyway, so I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'm just not going to be a guitar player. So I left. And then Kyle and I were like, okay, well, we're not going to be in a band together. And I was like, I still want to play bass. I'm not a good guitar player. And so I had the guitar still. And then I was like, okay, cool. I found another band, blah, blah, blah. That fizzled out. And then I came back. I'm like, you know what, Kyle, I've been practicing. I'm getting better. Let me play guitar. So I joined his band again, which was Plane Without a Pilot. He had found another guitar player. And a bass player. He had moved to just singing because he's a really good singer, just naturally, kind of one of those people that you hate. They're naturally good at singing. So he had moved over to that, and then so he had like a 4-piece band going. And then kind of around that time, they had added a lead guitar player, so they were now immediately just a 5-piece band, as I was talking to Kyle about joining his band as another guitar player. So I'm like, okay, cool. But Kyle's like, well, Brian's my friend and I like him better, so he moved one of the guitar players to being like, oh, you're a keyboard player now. And it was just like, when you're a kid, you're like, sophomore year, whatever. It didn't matter, but people were just like mad and they hated everybody and just like all the bickering back and forth or whatever. So that didn't last long. People left. We kind of reformed, yada, yada. And then it all buckled down to where everybody in the band left except for Kyle and I. So we looked at each other. I'm like, well, let's regroup. And we kind of looked at each other. I'm like, who is a better guitar player? Because we both were like competent bass players. And Kyle's like, well, I guess you're a better guitar player. Because at that point, his uncle had like bought him a telly, or he had done the same. He actually had done the same thing I did, but like in his own world. He worked for his uncle. He, did chores and stuff like that to get a Fender telly. And then I had the bass and guitar, and I'm like, okay, well, we could do either one. And so we kind of basically flipped a coin. It was like neither one of us were really that good at guitar, but I'm like, okay, well, you're a little bit better. Fine, you play guitar, you play bass, and that's what we are doing today. That's how it decided how we are today. It
And how
was
many
basically
years
like,
has that been?
uh, I want to say that was like almost over 15 years ago.
Wow.
Just the one moment was like, who's okay or who's better okay at guitar? It was maybe like 14, whatever, give or take. But it's been a while that it was just like on a whim that we kind of just decided, like, okay, we both have guitars and there's a bass that we can, either one of us use. Who's gonna do it? And Kyle's like, well, I guess I'll just do it, whatever. And that's how we decided. And it was so dumb, but I love that. I mean, I don't know. I have a big passion for, both bass and guitar, and like even today, like I think bass is such an important instrument, and just its sound and its importance to the band. It shouldn't be just left up to be like whoever's the not as talented guitar player shouldn't be the bass player. I'm like, you should be a competent bass player to be a good bass player to add to the band. It's like a drummer, they're just as important. They're the rhythm, they're the heart, the pumping, to the band. But anyway, that's so that's kind of how it all started. And I have been in the same band ever since with Kyle, making all the mistakes. Every mistake that you can, we did. And it's never broken us, because I think it's, the band is really built on friendship, which I can understand. Like, well, that is a dumb dream, Brian. Most bands can't do that because it's a business. You should make money. If you're not making money, you're destroying the music industry. Like, sometimes music can be fun, people. You can make music with your friends and do it for the love of it. I mean, Kyle and myself, and even we happen to cross paths with our current drummer right now. We are all having a ball playing music with each other. We can be in our drummer's, garage in a Sunday, afternoon, like at 1 p.m. We're just playing, like, oh, he's, his baby's asleep, and we're just playing in the garage, and we're like, this is so much fun. I guess we should book a show so that we can put this out so somebody can hear it. But like, we're writing songs, we're jamming, we're hanging out. I'm like, this is fun. I don't know why people can make something so, I don't know, I can't think of a better phrase, but something so beautiful, they can just put it in such a negative light and saying, musicians need to get paid. You should do this. I'm like, yes, awesome. When you play music you like and you get money for it, tell me, hey, hey, it's a good thing. I like it, but it's not a bad thing just to, have fun and play with each other. I don't know. That's kind of where we are now. It's like, okay, we've we've gotten close to, we're like, oh, we're getting a lot of people coming to our shows. There's talks of there's maybe you could push it out to get a record label and do this, We even know people who've tried that and got so close, but then they fell apart. It's like, oh, if you can do this touring package, if you have momentum enough and you have the right, lightning in the bottle, you can do it. But I'm like, that never let us down, because we know a lot of people who kind of get started. They try and catch a trend. They're running for it. They're in that, the running, race for it. They're like, oh, we're almost there. Oh, and then something happens and they don't make it. And so they break up. Yeah. They're done. I'm like, hey, we've seen that, whatever. And it's like, hey, we want to put a record out and it needs to sell this much. So we're selling our record for $20. I'm like, oh, there's four songs on there, dude. You're selling for $20. That's $5 a song you're selling. I know, but my art is worth it. I'm like, okay, if I got to make my money back and I make a living off this, I'm like, well, you can get a job and you could, maybe do this and see if that works out. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, what if the eggs go bad and they go rotten? I mean, it's kind of a thing. I'm like, I don't know. It's maybe a really childish way of looking at things. I'm like, hey, Brian, you're 30 years old. You should, think about the world a little differently. It's not all, sunshine and rainbows, but it can be. I don't know. It can be fun. Things can just be fun. And, maybe, honestly, playing music is kind of, it's a fun thing. And it can be, just if you just bring it to a juvenile thing, I'm like, hey, it's enjoyable or not. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm just rambling here, Clifton. Reel me in.
Well, the thing about your podcast that is very evident if you listen, if you've listened to it, is the fact that you and Kyle have known each other a long time, and the banter back and forth is so natural, you know, that it's something I think that makes the storytelling even that much better
Hmm.
because of the friendship, and I could see that, like, so many crossovers between that and your band and telling telling the stories. And I couldn't help but think, like, you were talking about how you used to like to make those comic strips and stuff, and I gotta think, what better way would it be to like start out as a songwriter than to like kind of storyboard your
Hmm.
thought processes like that. I mean, that's an amazing angle to get into writing, is being able to sum up your thoughts in a comic strip, getting to the point, because I mean you're limited
Yeah.
to the amount of words you can use, and the so many scenes, and a lot of that's the art behind it, and thinking like there's so much crossover between that and what you do as a songwriter.
Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely having that outlet somewhere in my life has been, I don't know, it's been good because I mean, it may not sound like it because I have been talking a lot over 30 minutes so far, just commanding the conversation, taking it over. But was like a quieter kid. I was always the person in the class that was just like, keep to myself, don't talk to anybody unless they I need something from them or they talk to me. And I was always a quieter guy, and Kyle was the opposite of that. So like that's how we like, oh, he sparked up a conversation, like kind of with me when we were kids, and like when we were in high school, we started just like, he like, hey, how's it going, da, da, da. And he knew I was new and he wasn't at the time, so he kind of introduced me to people, stuff like that. So it's, I don't know, maybe having a creative outlet at the time, which was drawing, and now it's music. So like music, you have to be more open and vocal, I guess. And
Yeah.
even just like, especially a podcast, I'm like, I'm preaching to the choir here. You have to be. Sometimes you got to dig for a conversation. Sometimes people are like, "Yep, nope." No, I need more than one word answers here, buddy. You gotta give me something good. Give me something good. And so I'm like, okay, working better at like, maybe conversation and how, you can direct it a little bit better or certain ways, or maybe, I don't know, I guess to say it's like, I don't know, sparking up conversations and like really listening and honing in on like what they're passionate about and what they're talking about. And I'm like, okay, that's a creative way and like a creative outlet to be someone who's almost an interviewer, almost somebody who's in a conversation. I'm like, there's a creative art to a conversation.
Hmm.
You can be two people talking at each other. I'm like, I'm going to speak my point. Wait till you're done, and then now I'm going to speak my point. I'm like, you're not conversing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blend it. Like ebb and flow with each other. And so I feel like it's definitely with the whole comic strip thing. I'll bring it back. It was like creating a story, and you had to like one know where the story was going to go before you could draw it, and then also like you had to know what it was going to look like. So visually, you had to like translate that, and then you had to have a story because you couldn't just like, oh, because nobody gave me a story to draw. I had to
Hmm.
create both and had to figure out the whole thing. And I really wish I had more time to do that. Luckily, with the band and some of the podcasts, I'm able to keep drawing, and I'm learning Adobe Illustrator and like actual practical ways to use drawing and artwork and stuff like that now. And it's all, I'm 100% self-taught. I never went to school for it, which you know maybe if I did take classes, maybe I can be quicker at it and better. But I mean, I've done some of the band's artwork for some of our albums and some of a lot of our T-shirts and stuff like that. I've done and stickers. I've done the artwork for the podcast logo. It's a caricature cartoon version of Kyle and I. I drew that, and I don't know. I still am able to flex that muscle a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like I'm at a point. Maybe I'm like a jack of all trades, master of none right now. I'm like, I'm drawing, I'm doing the podcast, I'm doing my band, I'm doing this. It's all fun, and it's all fun and games.
Yeah.
And people are like, yeah, I
I
don't
can totally
really.
relate to that. I think, one podcaster to another, this whole thing, like, you learn to
Yeah.
do things out of necessity,
Hmm.
and it's like, you're not going to be able to pay anybody to do any of these things for
Oh,
you.
totally, totally.
So you have to learn how to do things each and every little. It's like it's almost like a small business owner where you're trying to, um, oh, I got to learn how to do this. Then once I finish this, I got to keep doing this. And then it's like you make one decision and it opens up a whole
Oh
nest
yeah,
of
I
other
mean, it's like
decisions to make.
it's almost like I mean, for the band and for the podcast, it's like building a brand, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to like have that name association, sometimes with that logo association, that whatever you're doing, that would be like, oh, I know that. I've heard of that. Sometimes with the band, it's cool because people see the name. It's a long name, and people have made fun of it. Be like, "There's too many syllables in that name. It's boring. It's jumbled. It's busy." I'm like, "All right, cool, whatever. We're not going to change it. We've been in it too long." And then people are like, "Oh, I recognize that name. I've heard of you guys. I know you guys." And they see the logo or they see the band name, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you guys have a reputation. You guys have been around." Do we always get the biggest shows? No. Sometimes do we get really big shows just because we are who we are? Yeah, sometimes. And it's good, you know. And it's starting to be that way. No, I that's a terrible segue. I'm trying to make it that way with the podcast is what I'm trying to say. I just want people to have heard of it or whatever, maybe, and I don't know, maybe think of a different logo, but I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing with like brand promotion or whatever. And that's like you're saying, you have to learn how to do that. Right now, I'm just like, I'm doing things that I like. And if it gets too busy and worky feeling, you know, I don't want to do it. And so I'm like,
Right.
we do the podcast, and like I think we had thought of the idea of doing like I want to do like YouTube because everybody else does. Guitar nerds do it, and 60 Cycle Hum does it. We gotta do it too. No, you don't. Leave it to them because they are having fun at it, or they're making money off of it, or whatever. It's easier for them.
Yeah.
Because it's easier for them to do it than me to do it because I don't care of all the steps. How about
Well, I
that?
can relate to that because when I went to NAMM, I think I've been to 2 of each of the NAMMs.
Totally.
And yeah, when I first started going, I was so like preoccupied with I've got to capture video content because this is going to give me like so much premium YouTube content, and I got to do all this. And I realized like I'm not set up for that, not invested in that.
Totally.
Like if I could do what I do best. And,
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, I think for me, it's meeting people that I want to learn their stories, and creating content for the podcast, and if I want to take some pictures or do some live streams, that's just for fun.
Yeah.
But like there's this pressure, I think, among like the guitar podcasters, is I have to do all this stuff because like you see 60 Cycle Hum doing it and they're so successful, and that must be the recipe to, and it's not necessarily that. Like I think it's everybody's got to find their niche.
Exactly.
And doing
Yep.
what they do best and what they enjoy doing.
Yeah, it's like a thing. Even with music and bands, like everybody has a place, and you have to kind of almost find your place and then be happy with it. And if you're unhappy with it, then you can change it, and figure out what you want to do. But it's not really following the course of somebody else is not really ever the right way. Because how many times have we seen that with bands? I'm like, oh, cool. What? It's an easy one, but it's like, oh, hair metal in the 80s, that was popular. Everybody jumps and doing that. Well, there was a lot of not good stuff that came out of that, right? There's some really good ones, so you got your Motley Crues, you got your Van Halen, stuff like that. And then the grunge phase. Oh, was there a lot of good bands that came out of that? A couple, I guess. And then, you always think of it. And then like in the early 2000s, it was the pop punk thing, at least here in, West Coast. And then there was like the emo thing and, the East Coast, in the New York, Jersey area. And it's like some of those emo bands, like they hit off, and some of them, a lot of them didn't,
Mm-hmm.
If you're always chasing to figure out what the trend is, like you'll never find your own voice. And we're kind of at the point of like, oh, everybody's doing their own thing. And that's I don't know, what's cool about this guitar podcast, community is that everybody kind of is finding their own voice and their own spot. And then everybody's like super respectful of each other, I guess I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, like for example, do you ever think you and I would ever have crossed paths before?
No, because
ever.
I never,
Right?
I never thought I would have gone to the West Coast ever.
Yeah.
And like 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to go out there, and then like I've been so many times since. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, like that's the beauty about this whole podcasting thing
Mhm.
is being able to meet the most unlikely friends.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you got to think about it. It's like we're all a little bit of wackadoos, right? We love to push strings to vibrate at different tones in certain times to make sounds at different volumes. That's what we like to do. This is what we all do, and we're like, wow, this one sounds with this, and if we put it in it does this certain sound, and we talk about this. Like if you think about it, we're all like a little, hey, but that camaraderie. It's fun. It's different. Everybody's doing their own thing. Like I would never think of like, oh, a loudmouth, foul mouth like punk rocker from San Diego, and you're clean, on your podcast. Definitely more of a like your playing style is like I've seen you rip like in a country picking kind of way, and worship leader. And you're in the church. I still really don't even really know what that involves. I'm just kind of in some of these communities. I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Cool. And then we're friends. We're like supportive of each other. We like each other's podcasts. We like each other as people. I'm like, this is fun. We could talk about this stuff because sometimes there's a Venn diagram of like what our interests are in our own lives, and that Venn diagram, that the crossing point of that diagram is fun. It's great, and not everybody, but a lot of people are super respectful of each other, and the ones who aren't, like, well, they're not worth your time. We are meeting those people, and we're living it. We're doing it right now, today on this show, and it's fun. I love it. That's one thing I'm like, I don't know, jumping into doing a podcast. It's fun. That's probably one of the most like exciting things. And then meeting companies and stuff like that. They're the ones sometimes who listen to podcasts. They're like, oh yeah, I'm building something all day. It's fun to listen to these podcasts and you guys.
It's crazy, because it's not like, I think what's interesting about a podcast is it's kind of like any other medium, like say if somebody's making 100 downloads a week or whatever, like that's not acceptable even on YouTube.
Yeah,
but you do that in the podcast world, and that's like, oh, that's pretty good, because it's not like the widest platform. No. But I think it's like one of the deepest platforms when it goes to how deep like these niches run.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was really cool, and I guess this is kind of tying it back all together. When I was at NAMM this last time, I started seeing some of the like builders and even the smaller builders starting to, oh, okay, yeah, I can see the value in the podcast thing, and that they're interested in like chatting and talking because like they've seen it work.
Yeah.
From a marketing standpoint.
And sorry to cut you off.
No, I was just saying like it's interesting because like up to that point, like I had never felt like podcasting was kind of like the third string media guys,
Yeah, it's also a thing too, and maybe because we are in it, but it's also like, it's, to me, like sometimes you get so connected to your podcast. We're recording this on a Monday, and Mondays are my big podcast day. I have like, oh, I'm going to listen to, every other week I have the Tone Control. I have Fret Talk. I have 60 Cycle. I have my Bill Burr. I'm listening to these podcasts, and there's others. I'm like, every week on this day. If it doesn't come out that day, I'm like, wait, what's the hold up? Hey, come on, it's Wednesday. What are we doing, people? This is my Wednesday, commute. I'm at work. I need my Wednesday, podcast. Whatever the case may be. And so it's like you get involved, and sometimes I'm like, okay, it's like he's a celebrity, but it's like Bill Burr. I'm like listening to him like I know him. I've never met him. I'm sure I would never be able to meet him. And I have like a guitar podcast, and I'm like, oh, I've met Ryan and Steve. I've met even guitar nerds. They're from like Brighton, UK, and I've met those guys. I'm like, it's really cool. It's like you feel like you're connected to these people, but you're really kind of, some of them you're not at all.
Yeah.
Especially the bigger ones. But I'm like, it's like you kind of like are almost invested in what they have to say and what they do. And then, if they like promote a product, hopefully it's one that they care about or whatever. And then, so maybe that's like you were saying about marketing, and maybe like, okay, maybe like 100 people or 200 people or, whatever the case may be, like under 1,000 people are listening to this one podcast. But if this person like believes in this product, those 1,000 people are like, I'm going out of my way to listen to this. None of this it's not like TV where it's just like, if it's on, it's on, you have to seek this out.
Yeah.
And so like, that's the difference between like media nowadays. It's like, you think about like even like Instagram or whatever, a lot of the like media that we get bombarded with is of our own doing. It's because we're seeking it out. You're following these guitar companies, like say on Facebook or Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and you see like, oh, Gig Rig, hasn't that new wetter box pedal thing, blender between two things. I'm like, cool. Would you have seen that on television?
No.
No. Would you have heard about it on FM radio or whatever? No. So and so talks about the new strings that came out or new cables that like with this certain finish on it. And you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I might need to look into that. And it's because we are seeking that information out. We are like going on to, Instagram and following these companies and like, oh, we care about this type of stuff. And so like, it's I don't know, it's a thing about business that I've never like, I'm going to school for this. I know. I'm just trying to piece it together by what I'm like seeing and what I'm like trying to do with my, Tone Jerks brand. I'm like, hey, it's cool. Sometimes people want to see the dumb things that we post.
Yeah.
And that's one of our biggest things is to post. We post on Instagram. We don't, we're not doing a whole lot with Facebook, and we have a group that's, it's pretty active, but it's like, really it's Instagram. And I'm like, I don't know who follows us for what, but it seems to be people interact in different ways, and like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. The interaction between the two, because I think like I feel like I know the people on the Facebook more because of the
Totally.
heavier interaction, but there's people that will interact with you on Instagram that are not gonna
Totally.
find you on Facebook, and vice versa. But it's important to do both, and it's two different types of engagement between the two.
And there's a lot of other things that like even our favorite guitar podcasts aren't even doing. Discord, there's Reddit, there's chat rooms, like chat groups that other podcasts do. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know if that's a market that like, to be honest with you, I don't even really know what Discord is. But some of my favorite podcasts are like, oh, join our Discord. I'm like, I was the guy who Googled in YouTube what a Discord is and how to join. I still don't get it. Let me tell you. There's a podcast I listen to, spoiler alert, they're an anime podcast and they have a Discord. And I'm like, I want to join and be a part of their community, but I don't know. And I joined another anime podcast to join their forum. And it's like a forum, like old school, like you think of like a base talk or gear chat or whatever that was. The forums, it's not, I'm like, man, can't you guys have a Facebook group? And I'm like, maybe we're not the ones who are with it. Maybe Discord is the way to go. Because people are like, no, they have like, maybe they'll have like, one post on Instagram every 3 months. And I'm like, oh, join our Discord. I'm like, in the episode, I'm like, is that where the action is? I don't know how to do this. I'm like grabbing my phone and trying to smash it like I'm a chimpanzee.
That's a first
I'm
for
like,
me. I'm completely unfamiliar with that one. I think I've heard some
Me
called
too.
Anchor and some others.
Yeah, and then a couple other comedy podcasts I listen to. They're like, oh, join your Discord. They do not have Facebook groups. They have a Reddit, which I kind of get that. And I'm like, I'm barely in that community with things. I'm like, oh boy. But at least having some interaction with people is good because you can kind of gauge it. And with Instagram, it's weird because I'm like, oh, like you were saying, the Facebook groups are fun because that's where we kind of know each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a bunch of groups together. But I'm like, there's so many people who are not on Facebook because you got to think people like they just don't join Facebook. They're like, I don't want to be a part of that, and they just don't join, or they're like, oh, I don't want to be on there because my parents are on there. delete. Like, or I do a bunch of like raunchy stuff. I don't want, my parents seeing me drinking beers all night or whatever with my friends. I'll just join Instagram.
Right.
Stuff like that. So you got to think of like those markets. I'm like, now I say that's terrible to say markets. That's really not a genuine thing to say. But I'm like, you have to think of like, there's some people who will do one or the other. How like you and I will do Instagram and Facebook, but there's people who are like, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to do Discord. Who knows? Who knows who does what? And so that interaction with people, it's like, I don't know, it's good, but it's also not to say like now you have to chase and do what everybody else does. It's the conundrum. Hey, it's like what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Do you want to do what everybody else does, or do what you're comfortable with? We
Yeah,
both, like Facebook and Instagram.
It's a lot like I can equate it to like when I was a teenager, and I would go to like FYE or the whatever music store and spend all afternoon like on the hunt for something that I had never seen before, or like I would dig through alphabetically and through a genre of music and listen, and I'd get lost in there, kind of my own little world.
Yeah.
And I think that like those kind of mediums are gone. People aren't doing that anymore, but they have this like desire to hunt.
Yeah, to search.
Find, something new that they've never experienced before.
And it's now all like in a digital format. Like you can go on YouTube and discover something. You can go on, any type of social media or like forum or Reddit or whatever and find something new. And it's funny, it's like not everybody's into it, but I'm like, oh, I found out about, certain things on Reddit before other people did. Like the whole barefoot button thing. Like I found that one more time. I found that out way before like they even had a Kickstarter. Because I'm like, and I've talked to the guy on Reddit. I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. I remember talking, with the guy who was starting it. Like, he's like, oh, I'm going to do this Kickstarter starting soon. What do you guys think? And then you think of how big the company is now, It's like seeing how they use internet, I guess. How they use the internet. It sounds dumb. But yeah, no, I don't know. It's fun. It's a crazy little world that we're in that we are only seeing some of it. And if you think about it from the podcast community, guitar is such a tiny thing,
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about it from like, the internet perspective, that's even smaller. If you think about, like where the our little world is, I'm like, oh, some people like they get all bent out of shape about, oh, guitar memes are only in these 3 groups that I'm in. And it bugs me to see the same thing over again. You guys could just get off Facebook, you could try that, or you guys could talk about it all day. Or, Instagram. Like, oh, this post, I don't like it. I wish I could downvote it. I'm like, whatever. Or, whatever the case may be. It's like these certain things that we're involved in is so small in the grandiose thing of like internet culture and, even podcast culture. I'm like, you got to think, I'm like, some of the biggest guitar podcasts are a fraction of these smaller comedy podcasts.
Yeah.
Of these smaller, like, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of it, but like you got to think like Joe Rogan, he's pulling numbers. He's pulling big numbers. And those podcasts are kind of weak, but people love it, And you got to think of like, okay, how many people are into guitar? Not a whole lot. How many people are into guitar who listen to podcasts? How many people do you know listen to podcasts? So it's like you keep scaling it back. I'm like, okay, cool. So it's like you kind of get like, you know what? If you think about it like that, I'm like, I don't. I just keep doing something that, as far as podcast wise, I'm like, I do something that I would want to listen to, because the thing is, I have to edit it, and so I'm like, I know I have to listen to this. If it's not, if I get like, I'm like, oh, cringy, and I'm like, oh god, are we done yet? Can I put the outro music? Then I wouldn't want to put it out. And so we're at a point where it's like, oh, if we can have fun while we're recording it, and then if it's worth like re-listening to, I guess, then that's kind of where we are with the podcast. I don't know where I brought to that point because we never even started there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
you see, I do this. I just talk.
Well, podcasters, I know that it's probably boring for people who don't podcast, but podcasters just get to talking about podcasting, and because it's like it was a huge learning curve for me to figure out how all this works and how to put this in the right place and what not to do. I learned plenty of that. And so I don't know, like when I get with another podcaster, I just want to like talk shop.
Yeah. But it's fun. At least we're not just talking about like, what's your interviewing type? At least we're talking about like, at least the, type of communities that there are. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
internet communities are so vast, but yet so pocketed, I guess is a word. It's like you said, it's like we have, you can be like, oh, the biggest, guitar Facebook group is like what, 30,000 people. You go to like some of the subreddits, they are hundreds of thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
Not even close. Not even close. The biggest guitar podcast, tens of thousands, maybe. You go to the comedy podcast, 250,000. Not even close. Not even close. So you think about it, So it's like when you put that into perspective, I'm like, it's maybe a bad way to think about it. I'm like, hey, everything that's going on in this community, it's not a big deal. It's all fun. We're small. It's fun. Let's enjoy it and let's have fun with each other. Let's learn from each other. Let's make the community strong. It's not huge and it's not vast, but it's not going to change the world, but we can change each other's lives and have fun with it. I'm just like on a soapbox here. We can have fun. I don't know. I guess like that's maybe one thing I really wanted to bring up. It's like, I don't know. We're so vastly different, Clifton, you and I, and we could just talk. We can riff. We're talking for an hour, just about whatever, nothing.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of the whole, I guess the circle that has been drawn,
Yeah. It's like,
it's amazing. And, I don't know about you, but kind of what do you kind of look forward to on your horizon of something that you want to accomplish with the brand, with the Play Without a Pilot and the podcast Tone Jerks?
Let's see. I guess more or less like a foreseeable goal with I don't know, the band. I don't know. We kind of just play music and we want to write good music and that we think is cool. That's about it. But I guess with the podcast, I don't know. It's been growing, which is good, and we haven't been doing it. I don't know. We've been doing it in a way that we're like, hey, we put out something that is fun. It's some offensive language. If people don't like it, that's 100% understandable. But it's like we're not trying to like, punch down. If anything, we punch up, at some of the topics and like, if we like do try, if we do offend anybody, it's usually a punch up kind of, joke or whatever. And it's all a joke. And I think that's what people like, they listen to it. It's like from very different like walks of like, they're like, oh, it's like surprisingly a lot of people who play praise and worship listen to us. And you wouldn't think you've heard our show. You wouldn't think that like, oh yeah, I want to listen to them talk about playing in a bar and getting drunk and falling off stage or yelling at each other about like, oh, they should make this pedal mini or whatever. It's just, I don't know. We are, let's see. I don't know. I guess we're just like, it's really maybe kind of connecting that we can all, I can't say this without sounding dumb. We're all different, but we all like the same thing. So it's like we can have fun and just like take everything that's happening with guitar and music and like none of it's a big deal. And we all just, and it's a hobby that we all love. And it's like, it can be a passion. It can change, the world. It can change your world, but it may not be as dire and desperate as some other people need to think about it. And then, you can, like maybe you've been in some of these communities, people like get, so invested in some of this stuff. I'm like, it is fun. It's cool. And the thing is, I talk about it every week, but it's like, once it stops being fun, it shouldn't ever get to that point. And so that's how we I think that's how we approach our podcast and our topics of like, oh, sometimes things like, you can hear us ramp up, me especially. I get heated and start yelling and cursing, all the 4-letter words fly. And then, we bring it back and like we see things from different sides. And I think that's like maybe one of the biggest things I want to say, and I should have maybe led with that. It's like we have conversations where we try and see other points of view. We try and talk about, oh, what if something's like this? Well, I really don't like, say for example, it's like I don't like down-tuned or instruments or 5-string guitars, but I see a point in that in music, whatever. And, some people play these type of things. Like I don't, like solid state amplifiers, practice amplifiers. I don't want to play one of those that are dumb, but I see the value in it. And so it's once you can kind of like, step outside yourself and really, communicate, that's the best kind of conversation, I guess. And so maybe like more people tune into us because they feel like, oh, they are offensive, but they are actually kind of inclusive. It's like,
Mhm.
it sounds like, are you sure? That's like saying dry water, it doesn't sound like it would work, but I feel like so far it is. And people are like very surprised once they tune into the show. They're like, you guys are funny and you straddle the line of being offensive. And, sometimes you have really good points. Like there's one episode that we did where we talked about like it was like a local thing in our bands that we knew where they had different political views or whatever, and they were batting heads and stuff like that. That a band like broke up because of somebody like, well, I'm for this president. Well, I'm not for this president. You can
Mhm.
guess what I'm going for here. But they broke up because of it. A great band. I'm like, what is your problem? You're an adult and you couldn't see past that and just work together and be cohesive. Like, yeah, you guys believe in different things. What's wrong with that? You
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
are different people. You guys, I don't know if you guys know this. You guys have different heartbeats and different bloodlines, and blood going through your veins, and you're breathing different. Like you guys are different, separate human beings. You guys can believe in different things and still respect each other and go. And so anyway, so it's that type of thing. It's like we said that once, and we were just like, two kind of dumb guys talking, and then we've gotten comments from people like, "This is probably one of the smartest episodes." It's like, wow, you guys had really good points. And we're like, oh boy, you don't know who you're reaching.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, this episode was actually pretty deep and you guys had good points. I'm like, oh boy, I don't even know what I said. I think it was more or less kindergarten logic that I was like, come
Yeah.
on, let's all be
But
friends.
it's
hang out.
real, and that's I think that's the thing that draws people
Yeah.
in. It's like, this is real. This is not being
Yeah.
fake. This is being candid.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, it's cool. And it's like, maybe that's our mindset of like, hey, we all like the same thing. Let's have fun with it. And like, we put our own brand out there and other people put theirs out. And it's like, let's all just kind of like, respect each other. And you can listen, you can listen to us or not. And you can like that person or not or whatever. But it's cool. It's all cool. It's all gravy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is the dumbest way to cap that one off. But yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because I'm in hot and heavy trying to pitch and self promote
Yeah.
the Whirlybird. I say that in jest. Actually, it's just something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. It's very cool pedal. Very cool.
Yeah, and you've had a chance to play that, right?
Yes, I played the initial prototype that was at Co Schneider's house.
Mm-hmm.
But word on the street is he has one in his midst, the production model. So I'm going to get that in my hands and give it a whirl.
Yeah, that's true. He's making a little journey up the I-5
Definitely.
next week, and there's a certain event he's gonna have it at, and so you might want to hit him up before he goes up there. But now you were talking about wanting to do some crazy stuff with it.
Yeah, no, when I played it, it was definitely had some like harmonic, it's not like harmonic tremolo, but it had like almost like could create patterns and it's very rhythmic, like how choppy it was. And obviously like, as a helicopter, it's choppy. But it was cool. I mean, it added like certain harmonics if you're playing with like a distorted amplifier. A lot of people do clean, but you can do distorted amplifier. It's adding harmonics, and I'm like, oh, if we add some modulation, it can do something crazy. And I was like, oh, one kick I've been on has been doing the Korg Miku pedal, which is like almost like it's if people don't know, it's a pedal that has the it makes your guitar sound like a synthesized voice from a Japanese anime character who is a pop singer in Japan. You can choose like I think 10 different voices and phrases that she can say, and it turns your guitar. It doesn't even sound like, oh, here's a clean blend. No, it does not sound like a guitar anymore. And so once you're doing that, I've been like kind of like on the search for just kind of weird pedals that can like, okay, make this sound even crazier. It can make songs with it because everybody says like, oh, the Korg Miku is an unusable pedal because it doesn't make your guitar sound like a guitar. But I'm like, yeah, you can still create music with it. So I'm very much like, oh, plug into an amplifier, distorted amplifier, get a good crunchy or distorted sound, blah blah blah, and go and record songs in my band. But I'm also like to create the weird, crazy sounds. So I'm like, oh, I want the reverbs, I want the crazy delays, I want the synths, like like Kyle's more getting into synth, but I'm like, oh, I don't know what if I would say that the Miku is a synth, but it's like, I don't know, it's like completely changing your guitar to make it like sound like a voice. So you can put that
Hmm.
through delays and like, oh, I did it through the Boss Slicer, and I'm like, I know it's not the same thing at all, but I'm like, some of the way it chops up notes is similar to the Boss Slicer, which like almost adds like harmonics and musical, like, I don't know, different notes and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, I'm really looking forward to getting the Whirlybird to try it with the Miku and maybe the Arbanoid and some like other, maybe, I don't know, like trying to think of like what else I would do. I'm like, I don't know, maybe add like, some like pitch reverbs and stuff like that. And just, I want to make it like a crazy sound. People are like,
I would
wow.
suggest one thing if you have an extra tremolo you can get your hands on, stack the Whirlybird with like a more like predictable tremolo.
Yeah, because I have a Flint. So maybe
Yeah.
I could totally do it with
You
that.
can get like these. It's almost like when you stack like delays, like that are different, set on
Oh,
different
very
times.
cool.
It
Yeah.
it it really it gets really warbly and weird, and it could. I think it would really be. You could soundscape with that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what the thing is. I don't know. It's just fun to just do that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I think was it the Joe Bonamassa' worst nightmare here. I'm like, I want to make it my guitar not sound like a guitar at all. If I can do it with that, and the Whirlybird, it has that range. Obviously, a
Hmm.
totally usable trem and the dirty boost kind of deal that you can have. Even if you roll up the depth back, you can have it just like a boost, and it can make your amp sound just I don't know. It adds the better.
What I found
And
out about that, you were talking about the harmonics though, and something I did not know till like recently was that it, in essence, it's not a clean boost. It's a like a top end boost,
yeah.
and
I-
so what it's doing is kicking off those upper frequencies that a lot of times like a tremolo you would lose because
Oh,
of
very
the,
cool. Yeah, no,
and
that
so
makes
it's
sense.
kicking that kind of into overdrive where you can hear all those subtleties
Yeah.
of the tremolo.
And it really comes out with that
Yeah,
pedal. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, I'm excited. So I'm gonna post something once I get that. Maybe in the next week or so, I'll post something stupid so people will be like, oh,
yeah. I would love to. I would love to hear that. I would love to. I thought it'd be really fun to if get a hold of like a cheapy toy synth and
Oh yeah.
like run it through that and just see what it would do. I think I could have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. No, it's a very cool pedal. So I'm hoping to get my hands on it and then we can try something. Just get some all the weird, wacky stuff because people, they've heard the demos and they're like, yeah, it's a good rocking trem rocking little drive in there. But it can, let's get it to do the weird stuff, weird, wacky kind of
Yeah,
deal. Is
yeah,
it going to be, pleasing to the ears? Probably not. But let's get it, let's push it over the edge over that side.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to sound like Creedence Clearwater.
Yeah, you don't have to pigeonhole it.
Yeah. So, well, awesome. I've had a lot of fun. Having you on the show and kind of workshopping back and forth about our views on music and podcasting and telling our story, and it's been a lot of fun. And
Totally.
yeah, go check out the Tone Jerks if you have not, and it's a really great show. And go listen to Playing Without a Pilot. And I think it's for me. I'm just gonna kind of go out on a limb here and say I'm not usually a punk rock listener, but even when I listened to it, I was like, "This is fun music." And so
Thank you.
you don't have to like punk to like Playing Without a Pilot. And so go check them out.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever podcast catcher you're listening to this on, we're on that. We're on Spotify with the band. We're on iTunes. We're on Bandcamp. Everywhere you kind of stream music, you can find us. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I think before we hit play and record on this one, we were like, what are we going to talk about? But we're running long here.
Yeah.
We're just gabbing. I think that was all like, hey, we're both hosts and we just gab. That's what we do. And you put us together. It's going to run long.
So you get an hour 10 episode. So there you have it, guys.
All right, thanks so much. I'm gonna have to have you on our show. We're gonna turn the expletives on for that one. Sorry, but I'll have to invite you back and have you come on our show.
Well, I was on Just Surprise Me last week, so recorded with them. So I think I'm good.
You're like, okay, I think I could do this.
Yes.
But yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. It was fun to do like just the duet. Like I said, we're just the two of us this time. But yeah, thank you. I mean, hopefully everybody enjoys this one, and I guess we'll see you later.